these are undoubtedly high and big question times. Lots of high tension, high voltage, kind of high octane energy. And also this, I think, this pull, which you might feel like you're being pulled apart, but actually I think what's happening is we are being pulled to create a bit more space so we can actually see what's going on in situations. What I see with this particular full moon in Aquarius, so with that, you've got the sun in Leo and the moon in Aquarius, is the very strong need for personal authenticity. Personal sovereignty is represented by the sun in Leo versus the collective truth and the idea of social persona. And so I think one of the big questions is, which way are you going to go? Which way are you going to be pulled? But there's also some other themes, unmasking, coming out of confusion and coming into clarity. These are all very, very strong. We've also got some very sort of, I mentioned high octane already, but high octane, high energy aspects, including Uranus, Pluto and Mars. These are our fire starters. These are the energies that get things moving and catalyzed and shaken. And, you know, they're quite surprising when they work together. We've also got Saturn and Neptune in their existing conjunction, really adding fuel to the fire for sure. So there's a lot going on. So what I'm going to do in this exploration of the full moon is talk about, first of all, the aspects of the full moon. You know, like where are the planetary placements? And we've got so many different patterns, as you'll see, and they're all slotting in together to create what looks like an envelope or an envelope, according to where you are in the world. You know, so there is this shape that looks like you've opened a letter up, and there's so many different planets that are aligning, not exactly, but they are really aligning to create these very solid and dynamic shapes in the birth chart. And, you know, we haven't had astrology like this for a really, really, really long time. So there's a lot to definitely deep dive into. I'm also going to be looking at the Sabian symbols, which are, I think, really messages from consciousness. That's how I see them. They tell a story. There's 360 degrees, as you might know, 360 degrees in the circle. There's 360 different stories or metaphors teaching us about energy. And so I'm going to be looking at the Sabian symbols for the position of the full moon and also the position of the sun at the time of the full moon. That's going to give us a real scope. I know there's a lot to do with unmasking and the mask slipping. So this is, you know, we're really talking about persona, social persona, like the seen persona versus what's hidden. There's really some shaking coming up. And also adding in some named asteroids. Now, I know I can tell you we've got, for sure, we've got Narcissus that I'm going to be talking about, Juno and Vesta, but also Siwa and some others. So there's going to be some really strong messaging coming out. But most of all, really what I want to do with this forecast is really give you the chance to ask yourself some big questions. I don't know if, like me, you're already feeling into it. I know on Friday I felt some really strong, dynamic, assertive, aggressive kind of movement energies, and I had a bit of a tantrum, which I haven't had in years. Honestly, it really surprised me. But I felt this very, very strong sort of birthing of energy. It's like pure energy. Didn't feel very pure, but I mean, it was this bursting forth for sure. And, you know, actually on that day, that was the day when the Schumann resonance completely came off the charts. So, you know, it's not just, you know, I had an outburst, but there is a lot of mirroring going on. You know, what is going out there with these high energy moments is also happening inside for us and with our governments. You know, there are lots of different stories going on. So I really want to piece this together as best I can. Right off the bat, you know, the questions that come up for me as I'm looking at this, and these are the ones I'm going to be referring to. There's actually 4 of them. I've got 3 fingers, but there's 4 of them. So the first one, what truth have I been avoiding about my social persona? And am I ready to face it now? You know, so I do think we're going to get to look at our social persona. I think that's been developing for years. I think most of us really came into the knowledge of it around the time of COVID, I would say, because there was so much pressure to do things for the good of humanity. And that's how, you know, that was the kind of messaging. You're either with us or you're against us. You know, to be a good person, you have to do this. There's a lot in our world right now about what it is to be a socially accepted person, social credit scores and things like that. I know they're all being developed. And what does it say about you, your social persona? Are you ready to face it now? Because your social persona's down here and you're going to be facing it for sure. Where have I confused devotion with self-sacrifice is another thing that I think is important to look at. You know, devotion and self-sacrifice, it shows up so many different parts of this chart, but in particular I'm really looking at Saturn and Neptune. Saturn has a lot of responsibility, and Neptune really shows where we can get very confused. We can be very selfless and forgiving, but we can really twist it around and sometimes not get the balance right. And so I do think we might realize that we have self-sacrificed, believing we were doing it for a good cause, doing things in a very sort of devoted way. I think that's going to be expanded on quite considerably with this opposition to Mars. Also, what part of me is asking to be seen? I've asked similar questions recently, but, you know, with the whole unmasking energy, I think that's coming up. But there's a different twist on it. So what part of me is asking to be seen? Not for approval, but for truth. So again, we've got this sort of division between approval, social approval, versus your own personal core truth. It's very strong. And the last question that I think is also interesting, and I'm really curious as to what you feel when I ask this, or how you feel when you ask this to yourself. Am I ready to reclaim light without guilt? I mean, what I mean by that is, are you ready for things to go really well for you? Like if all of a sudden life was to turn around for you, are there any resistances that come up? And they often come up in a microsecond, you know, that part of you that's actually a lot more aligned to your own self-sabotage. I've definitely been meeting that part of me in the last few days. But this is important because Neptune really brings about guilt. And so these are some major themes. And, you know, we're going to be looking at these different things going on, these oppositions, trines, rectangle, and envelope. So let's pace it out right now. By the way, if you're new to this channel, my name's Louisa Munson, and I work under the name Feel Good Astrology because I think astrology is a really useful tool, and I hope that the way I'm using it is to help you feel better about yourself, to feel good in yourself, to feel good in your life. I think astrology gives us the keys to do just that. It shows us where we might be lying to ourselves. It shows us where we might have things hidden, but it also shows the kind of lightness we have and how we might access it. So hopefully it's good. And if you've been here before, thank you so much and welcome back. In fact, let's just say a big thank you to everybody that does support this channel and also my memberships. I really, really appreciate you all. But anyway, so let's have a look at some of these first things. So obviously with a full moon, it's made from an opposition between the sun and the moon. So they'll always be exactly in opposition at the time of the full moon. We've actually got two oppositions across Leo and Aquarius. And it's interesting because at the time of the new moon, which was just last week, it was on the 24th of July. I'm losing track of time. We had the sun and the moon in opposition to Pluto. So it brought with it lots of very strong ideas about our transformation and where we're not completely free. But it would have put into action this feeling of how can I build something for myself? And this tension between us versus, and you could say this is the state, this is the government, this is the new way of looking at things that is absolutely pushing on social consciousness. The sign of Aquarius has a really strong social consciousness marker. It's really all, it really holds a lot to do with utopian ideals, equality, diversity, and all of those different very strong concepts. And also about being comfortable, about being different is definitely something that comes up with the Aquarian theme. So we're expecting some of this anyway. But this new moon in the sign of Leo is really about celebrating your normality, celebrating how functional you are, celebrating how strong you are, celebrating how majestic you are. And so that, I think that new moon, literally just a week ago, was really bringing us into this sense of our own personal pride, but the tension that it might cause in the outer world. Now, 2 weeks later, or, at the time of the full moon, we've got the sun and the moon have moved a little bit further, but Mercury retrograde is holding that space in opposition. So we've got a double sort of Leo energy and a double Aquarian energy definitely going on. But what is actually more remarkable on this particular day is just before the exact full moon, Saturn and Mars are exactly in opposition to the very degree. And then moments after the full moon, Mars goes into an exact opposition with Neptune. So throughout the whole thing, they are in the tightest of oppositions. And so if you think the full moon is like a tension, a tenseness, it's definitely an aggravation. We often don't know which hand to go on. We often feel very sort of unbalanced. Of course, if you can, like often we feel like we're pulled one side versus the other side, but the key is to get into the balance, into the integration of all the different patterns that are coming up. But of course, you add in another opposition, and you'll see that there's this like Leo, Libra energy versus Aquarius and Aries energy. Which is interesting because there's two fire, two air. Fire and air just whip each other up into a frenzy. To me, even though there are these oppositions, the energy of fire, it's going to get encouraged by the air energy. So I really see that Mars, our inner innate aggression, our innate confidence and determination, that vitality that we have that really pushes us, that is, even though it actually Mars isn't very happy in the sign of Libra, it's still going to be igniting that sense of rush and energy, because it's an air, you know, when you mix it with fire, the fire gets stronger. So, you know, Mars is really whipping this up, especially in his opposition here. And, you know, the fire that is offered from Neptune and Saturn, it's really bringing, like Saturn and the sort of Aries energy is really bringing in this sense of very strong discipline, a very strong leadership, like an unstoppable leadership energy. And Neptune in Aries is really bringing, I think, guilt trips, definitely some spirituality and some spiritual ideals. I think ideology is going to become voraciously pushed onto people. So to me, there feels like this very, very strong battle coming up, especially around the time of the full moon. I think whatever is in the undercurrents right now is just going to really erupt around the time of the full moon. And, you know, I'm already feeling it happening. And I always think, test yourself first. What are you noticing in yourself? If you're noticing irritation, if you're noticing like a jitteriness, like you want to do something but you don't know what to do first, this kind of impossibility that you might just want to just suddenly explode or lash out. If you're noticing things like that happening with your children or the people around you, if you go and have a coffee and you're just like listening into what's going on in the street and stuff, I always think it's really important to just keep an eye out. The weather right now is changeable and kind of explosive. In fact, the kind of weather patterns we're seeing right now really, I think, are matching the upcoming eclipse season that's going to be really starting later on this summer. So, you know, we are coming into a time of really big change. This feels very eclipse-like to us, to me, even though it's not actually the time of the eclipse. It's the next lunation that's going to be bringing that in. But we're really coming into that energy. This is if we're already building it up to quite a high peak already, imagine where the eclipse energy is going to take us. So I think whatever is going on is bringing everything onto the table, nothing hidden. There can be no elephants in the room because we're going to see everything. I do think there is going to be this very strong energy of upset, disclosures of all kinds from all parties or factions, from yourself. I think, you know, and I think whatever's going on in the world is going on in the world, but what I'm always interested in is what's going on for you. So I've noticed this feeling of self-disclosure where I'm really seeing my own patterns much clearer than I've ever seen, and I think that's just going to keep happening. And I wonder if that's happening to you too. I'm sure it will be, because I think as above, so below. And, you know, if it's happening to me, and I know it's happening to some other people around me, It's in the field. It's in the field of human consciousness. We're picking up on it. So it's like we're all these very well-attuned receptors, and we're picking up on this energy, and we're running with it. And of course, the fire and the air is just making those ideas, those seed points spread far and wide. It's felt and it's known, I would say. So yeah, we've got these three oppositions. Then this is where the envelope comes in. You can really see it clearly. So we've got what's known as a mystic rectangle, and that is you'll see that it comes up with two trines, and trines are always very sort of harmonious and active energies. You know, they're really showing us where there's a flow. So, for instance, there's this beautiful flow between Mars and Pluto, which is great if you've got a strong Scorpio in your chart, if you've got Scorpio rising, Scorpio moon, or Scorpio sun. You know, this full moon is going to be, whilst it's going to be probably bringing up some stuff, it should really help mobilizing things for you, because your two rulers, Mars and Pluto, are working harmoniously together with no resistance. So they are going to be really working beautifully. So yeah, we've got this trine here, and we've got this trine from Mercury retrograde to both Saturn and Neptune. So there is this sort of flood of internalized information, because it's Mercury retrograde, it's internalized, this internalized knowledge about our ideologies, our self-discipline, our desire to bring heaven to earth, to stabilize our dreams and how we might do that. So there's a lot of self-talk. All three of these are retrograde. So they're all working beautifully together. And then Mars and Mercury retrograde are in a sextile, and then Pluto and Saturn and Neptune are in sextile. So a mystic rectangle is always two sextiles and two trines. So there's no resistance, apart from the two obvious oppositions that are also taking place. So yeah, that's fascinating in and of itself, that we've got these two very strong oppositions, but that they're applying and showing themselves in a mystic rectangle. This is very focused energy with not much resistance, but a lot of energy to get moving on something. So yeah, things are going to start transforming. We've also got this Grand Trine now. I mean, this is such a mover. Obviously, Uranus is, I think of Uranus as a frequency, a vibration. You know, it looks like a space invader or some kind of satellite. But, you know, Uranus is the higher harmonic of Mercury. So this is the known thoughts, beliefs, and communication that we have, that we can identify in ourselves. This is like our cosmic communication. This is our cosmic knowledge, our cosmic beliefs, our ability to channel information and to receive information as if we are literally an antenna, and we're picking up on frequencies and vibrations, and we're decoding it in our brain and in our body, and we understand it, and we have this sense of knowing. So there's this very strong sense of knowing and telepathy going on at the point of this particular full moon. Now, this is already like this in the week ahead. You know, like as I'm looking at this, Mars, Uranus, and Pluto are already working together. So if you think Pluto has a lot to do with external power forms and also our internal controls, Pluto wants to be in charge. And so Pluto right now is showing up as anything that wants to be in charge, anything that wants to be in control. And also what we might be learning about our own control. I often find anything that is trying to control others does have a slip up at some point, because, you know, what are you resisting by wanting things to be in control? The thing you're trying to resist is usually the thing that comes up. So, for instance, like, you know, if you're feeling poor, you might be so controlling that you control yourself, you're cruel to yourself, you work yourself to the bone because you're afraid of being poor. However, you do it to excess, which is a real sort of Pluto theme, and then of course you get ill, and then you're even more impoverished. So I always think with Pluto and control issues, what's underpinning it, what fear or lack is playing that game with you, because you really want to kind of allow it to subside or surrender to it. And then when you surrender to it, you're able to achieve so much more. So for instance, if you realized your fear and faced your fear, you would probably, through the ingeniousness of being human and having a beating heart and, you know, being alive at this time, you would probably have the inspiration to be able to make the change. But when you're forcing and controlling, that change never occurs, or it does, and it's very sticky and very difficult. So Pluto often shows us where we're resistant. Always look underneath it. But Mars is absolutely there to lend as much energy as you might need for that perusal, for that investigation. Mars is absolutely chomping at the bit to help Pluto. And then you've got Uranus, which isn't just about frequency and vibration, but you could also expand that out and say it's about consciousness. And if you were to expand that into weather patterns, it's earthquakes, it's volcanoes, it's sudden storms, because Uranus is the god of the sky. And, you know, Pluto is the god of the earth. And so these two working together with Mars is really shaking everything. I should say also, Haumea, dwarf planet, Haumea is at 1 degree in the sign of Scorpio right now. And so is actually working very strongly, or aligning very strongly with Mars, with Pluto, with Saturn, with Neptune, and also with Uranus in particular. So, you know, Haumea is a really beautiful creativity goddess. I mean, she's a goddess of fertility and abundance in Hawaii and around that area. So she is able to create from herself. Like, she doesn't need a partner to be able to create her babies. She like kind of pulls bits of herself off, and she's this fertile place. But, you know, she really brings up energies of Hawaii. And it's interesting, you know, that there's a big volcano in Hawaii. There was like incoming floods from the Russian earthquake last week. I think, you know, Haumea here is possibly, you know, and her lineup to all of these planets may well bring some very, very strong earth changes in this area. But I mean, she is I think she's really showing us about all volcanoes and all islands and all of this kind of volcanic, like, it's the build-up of energy that is creating new islands, it's creating new earth. But it has to get really alchemized and moved first. So I really do think we're going to see some big shifts going on in the world. Yeah, Haumea is amazing. I spoke about her in one of my webinars with my members just last week. Had a lovely galactic astrologer called Trassa Grealish from Goddess Inspire. It's a brilliant channel. And if you want to learn more, check her out or join my membership, and it's there on replay. But Haumea is a really important character to put in this as well. So yeah, you see this beautiful envelope, you know, arriving in our skies. This is very, very strong. Yeah, very, very strong. And if you've got something like, if you know your birth chart and you've got planets at like 0 degrees, 1 degrees, 2, 3, 4, they're all going to be activated, especially if they are in air, fire, air, fire. All of these points are in air and fire signs. Isn't that incredible? So yeah, there's definitely a lot going on. We've also got this T-square between Mercury, Chiron and Pluto. So on the back of this Mercury retrograde, Pluto retrograde opposition, they're also squaring up to Chiron retrograde. Now, Chiron's the wounded healer. He definitely shows the stuff, you know, where we're vulnerable, where we might be feeling a little bit under par. Can definitely show us where we're not feeling very well. So it's like mental health and physical health. And so anywhere where you're not really allowing your darkness and your false persona to be really seen and investigated, anywhere you're trying to hold yourself into a pattern of this is who I am, absolutely, definitely, I totally face myself. Anywhere where you're not looking and possibly even deceiving yourself deliberately, I think that's going to put so much stress on Chiron. So yeah, attend to yourself. I really cannot stress it enough. Now there's this lovely I love this. This is, to me, the most beautiful, gentle, loving, nourishing energy I see right now. And that's Jupiter in the sign of Cancer. And you've also got Venus in the sign of Cancer. Jupiter's exalted. They're coming together. They're the two benefics of astrology, i.e. they're the two beneficial planets. You know, they're really bringing this kind of yummy, generous, forgiving energy, very maternal, very loving, very protective. So I do think there's going to be a very strong protection coming up around the time of the full moon in Aquarius. And as luck would have it, they're both not only applying into this conjunction, but they're both in a trine to the North Node, really showing us that compassion and self-forgiveness and forgiveness for others is a really, really strong key point right now for humanity. But again, I don't think you should be doing this for humanity. You should be doing this for you. That's, I think, the real key issue. I think one of the things that I also notice about this opposition is when you're doing things for humanity, you're so far out of your body, you're so far out of your real knowing, that you fall out of relationship with yourself. You know, you might not fully acknowledge what your actual needs are, and if your needs aren't met, I really see there's this difficulty to reclaim yourself when all of your energy is put out. It's moving towards the collective, it's moving towards the social. I mean, obviously, you know, if you're just like sitting at home guarding your money and just thinking about yourself, I also think I see the problem in that. But to me, there really is an issue at hand right now. We are being encouraged to come back into ourselves, to see ourselves, to know ourselves, to meet ourselves, and not to kid ourselves about who we are. It's a really big theme. So let's have a look at what this might mean in terms of the Sabian symbols. This is the Sabian symbol for the full moon in Aquarius. Now, if you haven't been to sabiansymbols.com, I highly recommend you do. It's Linda Hill's amazing website. All 360 degrees are all recorded. Now, wherever like a full moon is, or your own sun, if you're checking out your own Sabian symbol for your birth chart, always, when you go to her site, put in the degree that it is in the birth chart. So this full moon is at 17 degrees. And when you put it in, it will always be rounded up to the next degree. That's how these work. So, but don't round it up before you go onto her site. Put in the real place and she'll round it up. So automatically it rounds up to Aquarius 18. And the message here is a man being unmasked at a masquerade ball. So it's funny, I'm going to one tonight. This shows being able to see through others, to be able to unmask people, to reveal oneself or hide away when it's needed. It seems that someone is having their mask stripped away. They're no longer able to masquerade, and they are revealing themselves, who they are, and possibly their intentions. Secret motives may have a purpose at the time they are concealed, but they almost invariably become known. You may find that you or someone else finds themselves in this situation. Difficulties and embarrassments can arise, but staying true is the important thing. There may be a need to look after your reputation. Secret motives expose having to face oneself, judgment about true worth, gaining true insight into somebody, wearing a mask that suits situations, the joy of surprise. Now, you know, obviously if we're not working with that energy and we're really hiding ourselves in a big way, then often you'll get to the bottom part of this forecast, which is detrimentally revealing yourself too quickly, finding answers that aren't welcome, revealing a fraud, charades, pretense, employees to manipulate, lies and liars. So I think the whole gamut of subterfuge is on the shelf. You know, it's right in front of us. It's actually on a plate ready for us to consume. We're going to be seeing it. Like what has been hidden is being exposed. It's coming to the light of day. And you might start to feel quite vulnerable. Like if there's something about you've been masking or hiding about yourself, if there's something that happened in the past that you're not proud of, it may well come up, or similar situations may come up. So this is a time when it's happening for all of us. And so that's what the moon is really showing. And in the sign of Aquarius, it's so much to do with the social persona. Now, the sun in Leo is equivalent to Leo 18. with the Sabian symbols, and the message is a bit different. So this one says, a chemist conducts an experiment for his students. This symbol implies being willing to try something new, a new discovery, something different, and to step outside the square. The message, whether you're a participant or an observer, is to pay attention and attend to details. Going by the tried and true scientific model that sticks to doing experiments exactly the same way over and over only leads to the same result. That's interesting. A mix of new ingredients can lead to new creations and can lead to new surprising results. Even if you're unsure of outcomes, being willing to take risks can lead to interesting possibilities. Be sure of the mix of ingredients, though, as some are dangerous and unpredictable. Alchemy, radical educations, wisdom passed on, putting things to the test, teachers taking chances on outcomes for students, the thrill of discovery, leading by example. And I guess what is harder to hold on to right now is always by the rules of the book, like holding things and suppressing creative ideas, narrow viewpoints, being afraid of outcomes, skepticism, conservative science. Everything that is trying to hold everything in a box is working against the energy of this full moon. This full moon is the thrill of discovery. This full moon is, yes, things are being unmasked, and what do we learn from it? And maybe we need to apply different thinking to situations right now. So there's definitely something very fast, very revelatory, and quite daring going on, I would say, with this full moon. So that really adds to the tension. Let's also have a look at some of the other things that are going on. So I've put in some different asteroids that are showing up. Now, I use a website called serenu.com. That's www.serenu, SERENNU.com. And you can put in the time, place, and date of birth for yourself or for a full moon or a new moon. And then it will bring up lots of different asteroids. And I do a deliberate look to find asteroids that are working with the sun and the moon or against the sun and the moon in a conjunction, opposition, or in a square, because that's where I'm seeing the stories of these asteroids playing out. And so Siwa is a Slavic goddess of life, love, fertility, and the vitality of nature, particularly in spring. So we've missed spring, we're in summer right now, but she's about fertility and getting things moving, and she is about the sort of fertility of the moment. So it's interesting that she's in a conjunction with the sun in the sign of Leo, that is absolutely about your own fertility, your own kind of bounty, your bounteous nature, you could say. It's also about, if you think back to the message of the chemist conducting experiments and being sort of excited, to me this is an exciting, let's see what we can draw for ourselves. What new things are of interest, what can we turn our attentions to? To me, this is an indication that we are coming back vibrantly into our own nature, and I think that's really important. We've also got Askalphus. Now, Askalphus is an interesting one. I think he saw Hades give Persephone a pomegranate, and he saw that Persephone ate half of the pomegranate. And so in the big story about Ceres and Persephone being kidnapped into the underworld by Hades, Askalphus gave some information that condemned Persephone to live in the underworld for 6 months of the year and then 6 months above. And so he was punished for tittle-tattling and telling tales. So he was spying and he was telling tales. And so I think at the time, and he was turned into a screech owl, an owl with a really unfortunate sound. And so to me, it feels like there is an element of punishment going on with this particular full moon. I think it's bringing up very strong themes about spying, about telling tales, about spying on different people, and the punishment for talking about what has happened. I mean, he actually told the truth. He actually told the truth about how many bits of pomegranate Persephone ate. It's not that he lied. He didn't lie. He told the truth. But he was spying. He was looking, and he was punished. And then, his voice was just like he was a screech owl. So he was very, very loud and nobody wanted him around. So there is a strong theme of that. And I can already see that bubbling up in the media. Very, very strong stories at the moment about spying and tall tales and all sorts of things. So I do think that's going to continue. We're going to hear lots more about that. There is also asteroid Albion. Now, Albion, I think, is a word associated with England, possibly because the White Cliffs of Dover, and Albus is, I think, white in Latin. So, whenever I see Albion, I just wonder, is something happening in England at the moment? Is there something big happening? The fact that Albion is in a square to the sun and the moon, to me, indicates that there's some unrestfulness going on, and that anywhere where things are unrestful, I know there's lots of uprising, lots of protests going on in the UK, and a blooming great big storm is due to hit right now. So I do think there's going to be some unrest going on in England, and possibly England's going to hit the headlines a lot more than usual. And that might have something to do with the vitality of nature and love and fertility, but it could also have to do with spying and telling tales as well. But yeah, that's also something to watch out for. Also, if you've got something like if you're associated with the word white, or if I don't know if white or Albion are motifs in your life, watch out for those, because they are in a square to the sun and a square to the moon. And then we've got this very interesting little parcel of information down here. I should also say that Lilith is also in this area, but I haven't put her on the chart. But Narcissus. So Narcissus was, he was not interested in meeting other people because he was really vain. And he spurned lots of lovers. He spurned the advances of women. And so he was punished for his arrogance to fall in love with the first thing he laid eyes on. And he fell in love with his reflection. And he just couldn't look away from himself because he loved himself so much. And he ended up starving to death on the banks of the river, just died looking at himself. So there's a very, very strong message here about Narcissus, like narcissism. And that could be, loving yourself so much that you'll be cruel to everybody else. But it could also be a message about self-love and the dangers of self-love, but also how far you might want to take it. So Narcissus is definitely a theme coming up, and I think it's going to blend in with these. So we've got Juno. She's the wife of Jupiter. She's the queen of the gods. She's the goddess of childbirth and marriage, but she had terrible, terrible jealousy. She was very, very committed and very dedicated, but she really did take her foul temper out on anyone that threatened her security. So that's an interesting idea there. We've also got Vesta. And Vesta's the goddess of the hearth and home. She's the goddess of the Vestal Virgins, all about purity, sanctity of life, prophetic vision, self-sacrifice. So there's this interesting thought here. Narcissus, he basically sacrificed himself by starving himself by his own love. He killed himself. Vesta, the goddess of the hearth, she's quite self-sacrificing. The Vestal Virgins were very pure. They were kept pure. They were kept out of normal life so that they could have their prophetic visions. And so that is a bit of a sacrifice. Juno, boy, oh boy, she had to try to ignore all of the infidelities and other children, illegitimate children that Jupiter had. And she stayed with him, but there was a sacrifice going on. She wasn't very kind to them. But to me, this is an area of sacred vows, sacred agreements, like sacred marriages and connections. To me, this is really calling us to examine what we've agreed to do ahead of time. Like the Vestal Virgins, they made a vow to be clear in their visions. They sacrificed that. It's a very, very strong theme. So I think this is talking to us about what are we sacrificing? What do we stand for? What do we love so much that we will put it above and beyond anything else. And of course, Lilith here as well, if she were in here, I mean, her story, it speaks of hiding yourself away because you're too much. There is a self-sacrifice going on with her, and she's mad as hell about it. She does not want to, she's really, really unhappy. And so she goes, I mean, a little bit like Juno, she goes out and she creates havoc for people who have ignored her and who've put her down and who've made her hide away and hide her beautiful skills and all of her energy. And so there is this sort of very strong commitment to maybe revenge, to have her say, to step out and to be strident. So yeah, this is a very, very sort of strong energy. And so we might find with the sun and the moon, you know, the moon representing our social persona, have we made a contract with ourselves that is uncomfortable, that doesn't work for us? Is it working for us still? You know, what is going on there? And do we love ourselves too much? That's also a different contract we're making with ourselves that we might want to ease off somewhat. And, you know, what has England done? What things has England agreed to that might well bite it on its bum? You know, what sacred vows and decisions and sacrifices has it made that might be creating problems for it? So to me, there's a lot here. And like I said, you know, where have you confused your own devotion to something? You know, Juno was very, very devoted to her husband and her children. What have you devoted something to with self-sacrifice? Where have you got caught with that? Where have you been avoiding who you really are, and how can you face that now? So there's some really, really big themes. So if I go back to the beginning, what truth have I been avoiding about my social persona, and am I ready to face it now? You've got some extra context about what might be playing out there. Where have I confused devotion and self-sacrifice? Definitely a very strong ongoing theme. And also, what part of me wants to be seen, not for approval, but for the truth of who you are, and how can you reclaim the light without the guilt? So these are, I think, the four concepts of what I think is really coming up for us to face around the time of the full moon. I do think it's going to be nuts. I think it's going to get busier and busier as we get closer and closer to that full moon. I think all bets are off. I think things are going to go crazy in the news cycles. I think we've got very strange weather. And I wonder what's going on with that as well. There's just a lot happening. And like I said at the start, you know, what follows after these lunations, we're coming into the time of the eclipse period, the second and final eclipse period of 2025. And so if we're starting it at this level craziness, where's it going to be in a month's time? So really, the more you can stay in this Mercury retrograde energy and go deep inside yourself, and really examine what's going on and hear yourself honestly, I think that is almost the best way to move forwards, because you're moving forwards with self-knowledge. You've taken your own mask off. And that's the great thing. Like when you take your own mask off, nobody else is going to take it off. Like that's one of the worst things, isn't it? Is when someone else calls you out for something, and it might be something that you're not even aware that you do. But that self-knowledge, being able to do that yourself, is a real gift. And so I do see that we are unmasking ourselves, and that it's helpful, because once we see everything with that purity and the clarity, we can make much better decisions, because we're not making decisions based on our fear. We're not making decisions based on a mistaken belief about ourselves, but we're making a decision about ourselves based on our core truth. And I think that is absolutely the best part of this full moon. So wishing you clarity, wishing you a jaw-dropping moment of honesty. I hope that mask comes off in the most beautiful way for you, and that what you learn about yourself is actually how wonderful you are. So I'm going to leave that there. Lots and lots of love to you. If you need any help at all, I'm about to start taking bookings for September consultations. So if that's of interest, then just check out all of my links below. And yeah, catch up with you another time. Bye for now.